How's it going everyone? Welcome to the channel. I'm the ChainBaker, and in today's video I'll show you how to make a 100% whole wheat, wholemeal or whole grain bread. Call it what you want. Let's go to the kitchen and have a closer look. Finally, a 100% whole wheat bread. This is by far the healthiest loaf to come out of my oven. It is made by cold bulk fermentation, which greatly improves the flavor and the digestibility of this bread. A soaker of grains and seeds is added for extra nutritional value. It also helps the dough retain more water, keeping it moister for longer. The best part is that you can customize it with your favorite grains and seeds. No matter what you choose, the result will be amazing. Just look at that beautiful hearty slice of bread. It has a complex flavor, a nice chewy texture, and will make any sandwich topping shine. And did I mention that it's super easy to make? Let's get right to it and see what we need. We'll need a bowl for mixing, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, and a loaf tin. Specifically a 1 kilo or 2 pound loaf tin. As for the ingredients, we'll need some high protein whole wheat flour, wholemeal rye flour or dark rye flour, water, yeast, salt, some malt syrup. For the soaker, I'm using millet, black sesame seeds, oats, toasted buckwheat and barley. And I'll roll the loaf around in sunflower seeds. And you can use any grains and seeds that you like. We'll start by making the soaker. It's extremely simple. We'll mix all the grains and seeds, and we'll add 2% salt to slow enzymatic activity. This will prevent the soaker from developing any off flavors, since we're using boiling water and keeping it at room temperature. The amount of salt contained in the soaker gets counted towards the total amount of salt in the recipe. Now finally, we're adding boiling water to it. This is the only way of softening hard grains like barley and millet and buckwheat. The water contained in the soaker also makes up part of the total water content in the dough. And saying that, the grains and seeds make up the 100% along with the flour in the recipe. And if you want to learn more about soakers in detail, you can find a dedicated video about them in the Principles of Baking playlist. And if much of what I've said so far didn't make much sense to you, you'll find answers to most of your questions in the same playlist. But moving on with the soaker, I've added the boiling water, I gave it a quick mix, now I'm going to cover it up and leave it to soak. It will take at least 3 hours, but I left mine for 24. Cover it well to prevent any water from evaporating. Now it's the next day. Let's have a closer look. The grains and seeds have absorbed almost all of the water. The soaker may seem a little bit gloopy and gooey, but don't worry about that, it's completely normal. If your kitchen is really hot in the middle of the summer, you can cool down your soaker to control your final dough temperature. My kitchen is quite cool, so I left it at room temperature. I'm using slightly warmer water this time, especially because this dough requires the stretch and fold kneading method, and that doesn't add much temperature to the dough. And to make the dough, grab a large bowl, add the water, the yeast, the salt, the soaker, then continue by adding the malt syrup, or you can leave it out if you don't want to add any sweetness to your dough. I simply add it because I like the flavor. You can also swap it for a different sweet syrup like honey or maple syrup. Now keep mixing, add the rye flour, give it a quick mix, and then, finally, add the whole wheat flour. And that's our final ingredient. Mixing in stages ensures that the ingredients are distributed evenly. It is especially important because we are going to leave this dough to rest before we start kneading it. This resting step will help the flour absorb more water, and it will make it easier to knead our dough afterwards. So mix it until you don't see any more dry flour, cover it up and let it rest for 30 minutes. During this passive step, the gluten will start developing without us even touching the dough. Now this is a very sticky dough, so wet your hands and wet your scraper, and then scrape the dough out of the bowl onto the table. I would always suggest wetting your hands when handling sticky dough, instead of adding flour to the dough. Now let's have a closer look at the stretch and fold method. It is the only way to hand mix this dough. If you press it against the table, it will be pretty much impossible to knead this. So watch my hands. Pick the dough up by one side, turn it 90 degrees, stretch it against the table towards yourself and fold it over forwards. Pick, turn, stretch, fold and repeat, and you'll get into a rhythm in no time. This dough is extremely sticky, so you want to use a light touch and quick hands. And every now and then, grab your scraper and scrape it all together, because it will keep sticking to the table. Don't get discouraged though, it will become less sticky as you keep going. To fully mix this dough, it will take around 8-10 minutes of stretch and folds. This will depend on the protein content of your flour. My one was 15%, so it took me 8 minutes. If yours is around 13%, it may take you 10 minutes. But once you feel your dough becoming a lot less sticky and a lot more cohesive, it's ready. When you pick it up and pull it, it should resist. And just as earlier, if you want to handle it, wet your hands with water. Now we can pop this in the bowl and take its temperature. Around 23 degrees Celsius or 74 Fahrenheit is just about right for this. My kitchen was really cool today, so it came out a little bit low, but it's gonna work regardless. Now we can cover it up and pop it in the fridge, but we'll only put it in the fridge for 1 hour. After the first hour chilling, we'll give the dough a fold. Folding helps with cooling down the dough quicker. It will also help with building tension in it. Just look at how sticky it still is. That's because of the rye flour. So we're going to use water again. Wet your hand and brush your table in a thin layer of water, and also wet your dough scraper. Now release the dough from the bowl and pop it out on the table with the smooth side down. Now flatten it out, then fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle until you reach point where you started. Look how stretchy that is. But once you've gone all around, it should be nice and tight. Now you can flip it smooth side up again, round it off, and then pop it back into the bowl. This time we'll cover it up and place it in the fridge for the cold bulk fermentation. I'm only using plastic wrap because the lid that I have leaves a gap and makes the dough dry out in the fridge. Now we can cold ferment it for at least 12 and up to 24 hours. I think I left mine for almost 24. And just look at it, it's puffed up beautifully. It's nice and wobbly and you can see all the fermentation bubbles. And straight away we can proceed to the final shaping. But this time we're using flour, otherwise things may get too messy. Dust the whole surface of the dough evenly. Then grab your scraper, release the dough from the bowl and pop it out on the table, smooth side down. You should always work with your dough with the smooth side down, because that's going to be the top side of it. And we want that to be always smooth and pretty. The shape of your loaf will depend on the shape of your tin. Long loaf, long tin, short loaf, short tin. But regardless of what kind of tin you had, the shaping is pretty much the same. Take the two sides, cross them over in the middle. Get it into kind of a triangle shape. Then starting from the top, gently roll it up. And once again, the light touch and quick hands is what you want to use. As you roll it, push it forwards with your thumbs. This will tighten it just enough. And now I will show you the neat trick of covering the whole loaf with seeds. And you can use this method for pretty much any loaf of bread. Although if the surface of it is a little bit dry, you may want to brush it with water. But this dough is sticky enough as it is. Now dust your hands with flour so they don't stick to the loaf. And again, pick it up and be gentle and quick. And all you need to do is simply roll the loaf from one side of the tray to the other. And it will pick up all the seeds along the way. And you definitely want to use a lot of seeds. This was about 100 grams and the loaf took almost all of them. And of course don't forget to coat the ends as well. Remember which way is up, because it's quite easy to lose the seam. And don't rush this and don't panic, take your time. And of course, since this is the final shape and we're placing it in the tin for the final proof and baking, it must go in with the seam side down, smooth side up. And you can press it down gently to make it fit the shape. As ever, the final proofing time will depend on the temperature of your kitchen. I'd say 3 to 4 hours should do it. My kitchen was around 23 degrees Celsius or 74 Fahrenheit and it took me around 4 hours. You can of course place it in a warm area to make it proof faster. But regardless of what you do, during the final hour of fermentation, preheat your oven. 210 degrees Celsius, fan off. And that's 410 Fahrenheit. You want this loaf to double in size before baking. And this has risen beautifully. It's nice and wobbly and full of air, so let's pop this bad boy in the oven. It'll take around 40 minutes initial baking. Don't expect this kind of loaf to rise a lot. After the first 40 minutes of baking, we need to take it out, but we're not finished yet. Give the tin a shake, give it a few knocks, and then take the loaf out. All the sunflower seeds should have prevented it from sticking. What you want to do now is place the loaf back into the oven. Lay it down on its side and bake it for another 10 minutes. This will ensure that the crust sets well. It will make the loaf keep its shape as it cools down. And it will also have a beautifully golden brown crust, not just on the top, but also on the sides and the bottom. And you gotta admit, that looks beautiful. And that's how you make a 100% whole wheat bread with the cold bulk fermentation method and the soaker. It is nutritious, tasty and beautiful, and it'll stay fresh for days. So what do you think of this recipe? Have you ever made 100% whole wheat bread? Let me know down in the comments. See more videos like this one? Click right here. And subscribe to the channel, click over here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.